Probably owing to too much of that Hungarian nectar Palinka last night. So thank you to my friends Miklos and Balázs and the great organizations that they work with in Hungary and worked with ACU. I've been involved with Cpac many times over the years. It's great to see Cpac come to Europe, and to do it here in Budapest obviously is extra special. It's great to be back in Budapest. I've also spoken at MCC multiple times. Budapest is like a modern-day Rome in the contemporary culture war, where there is widespread recognition that the West and its values are worthy of defending. And this is validated yet again, thankfully, at the ballot box with the recent plebiscite. We on the conservative side have recognized since the 1960s countercultural revolution, a cultural revolution born out of the American ivory tower left, and not all that dissimilar to the Maoist cultural revolution happening in communist China during the same era, that politics is indeed downstream from culture. Andrew Breitbart made this theorem famous in the last 20 years, but also, truth be told, my father, Leopold Tyrmand, an anti-communist Polish dissident and writer who emigrated from communist Poland in 1966 to the USA, was a proponent of the same idea all through the 1970s. He was a classical liberal, or a liberal conservative in European parlance, who fell in love with the idea of America, but once arrived, quickly became an arch big C conservative writer and cultural critic, whereby he founded the conservative think tank, the Rockford Institute, dedicated exactly to what we are here discussing in this segment of the day, the culture war and the media's role therein. His experience is illustrative. Initially, when he got to New York in the second half of the 1960s, he was feted as an interesting character, coming from behind the Iron Curtain to the West with lessons to impart. He wrote for many mainstream outlets, including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Detroit Free Press, and most notably the New Yorker, which was the main periodical of social and cultural criticism that graced every bourgeoisie coffee table among the thinking classes. As the hippie-led cultural revolution accelerated, my father received a first-hand lesson in how their cultural revolution directly impacted the greater culture writ large. By 1970, he was purged from the polite mainstream outlets that in these preceding years had extolled his words and ideas. He had written about the inefficiency and indignities of life under communism during these years, and then the editors, whom were captured by this diametric move to the left, told him he did not understand real communism, and he was no longer printed in these leading publications of the day. It was much like Tom Wolfe described in his great work from 1970, depicting leftist elite establishment hypocrisy, radical chic, and Mau-Mauing the flat-catchers. Rhetoric of "workers of the world unite" were uttered by cultural elites such as Leonard Bernstein, who would then turn around and yell at their working-class chauffeurs and servants. These cultural elites lost all sense of noblesse oblige and became caviar communists and limousine liberals. The hypocrisy was overwhelming. My father watched them descend into what he had just escaped from, a new cultural nomenclatura unmoored from the American egalitarianism and ideals and common sense that Tocqueville had described in his early analysis of America in his 1835 tome, Democracy in America. In Poland, my father had written a book about this cultural nomenclatura during the age of Soviet Soc realism called Życie Towarzyskie Uczuciowe, which is roughly translated as social and cultural life, about these cultural tastemakers' control of the body politic through mass media and entertainment, and their hypocritical behavior as the communist elite. And of course, this book was censored and not allowed to be published behind the Iron Curtain. So coming to the West from communist oppression and censorship, he saw the left driving the West more toward that again, which he had just escaped. He used to joke that he came to America to save America from itself. This experience with the Soviet Russian-style fake news he wrote about in his book, Communist Civilization. Every year, Moscow's Pravda would trumpet throughout the bloc, record crop yields, but yet everyone was starving. So did you believe the purveyor of lies at odds with your own hunger, or the physical manifestation of truth, your rumbling belly? His takeaway from this experience between the USA and Soviet Poland was that the more things change, the more things stay the same. Whether it's Moscow's lies or Beijing's, both then and now, or the leftist cultural arbiters in the West that too often made apologia for those lying liars and coercers of truth, the consistency was in the brazenness of their lies. We need not delve too deeply into the New York Times cover-up of the Holodomor and Stalin's mass starvation by design in Ukraine, and the Pulitzer awarded for such fallacious coverage. It's well known, but illustrated and worth ruminating on again and again, who these people are. The culture of the West is its birthright. The West that is rooted in the Enlightenment values of liberty, justice, and equality under the law, and espoused by the great philosophers of the Western canon, to name but a few. Mill, Hume, Locke, Hobbes, Montesquieu, on law and government, but also still more to the common sense, biblically ordained traditionalism espoused by Edmund Burke, the nuclear family, for instance, good versus evil and right versus wrong, basic morality. During the countercultural revolution of half a century ago, there was a cultural regression toward might equals right. But the conception of might was now newly derived from the contemporary cultural leaders utilizing technocratic mechanisms, such as the academy, the media, and the government as a proponent of social justice, all working hand in hand. What is social justice, of course, would change with the times, as we have seen and continue to see. Government meant for the securement of rights and natural law as ordained by a higher power, now in its progressive liberal turn, became a bestower of rights rather than its guarantor. And with that, the floodgates of progressive radicalism were let loose upon Western societies. My father used to say that liberalism, in the contemporary leftist sense, was a philosophy of conscience versus conservatism as a philosophy of reason. That is to say, what feels good is good, as opposed to the reality that there are clearly two genders, and that, to quote Hobbes, life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. The reality is that life cannot be engineered by radical ideologues. Original sin prevents their most harebrained idealistic schemes, predicated on their feelings, from ever taking flight. Case in point, communism, collectivism, socialism, the oft rejoinder, this time is different. Well, it's not. The human condition is as the human condition has always been, because this condition is populated by human beings, with all their concomitant venality, self-interest, and numerous flaws inherent in their humanity. This reality, however, was wholly rejected by the cultural elites, and they believed, as they continue to do so, in their technocratic abilities, hijacking the institutions and the systems, and engineering the societies they envision in their mind's eyes. Great writers from Thomas More to H.G. Wells to Dostoevsky all had a better handle on the pitfalls of this hubris than our 20th and 21st century Western cultural elites. Which brings me to dive into the most powerful mechanism these technocratic radicals have had at their disposal for the last 4 to 6 generations: the media, the printing press, the distribution, if not the wholesale control of distributing that written word. Let's take a moment to simply break down what the role of the media, the historically labeled fourth estate, is in society. It is to document and inform the society what is going on around them so that, as functioning and productive members of said society, citizens are better equipped to make decisions in their lives for them and their families. The word news sums it up well. Report what is new and important and what qualifies as this conceptually we literally call news. There has always been a role for editorial journalism, for opining on the issues of the day. And historically, that was segmented in newspapers and television journalism, and even now within digital media. There is fact-finding reported journalism and opinion journalism. But as the cultural elites further committed themselves to their own opinion on what constitutes social justice and have endeavored to bring about a just society as they perceive it, they have infected news reportage coverage with their opinions in every single facet. The easiest and most pernicious mechanism that those who buy proverbial ink by the barrel do to effect this injection of opinion, albeit in subtle ways, is by curation. Curation of what constitutes a new news story. Case in point, this past week in the USA, the horrific mass murder in Buffalo, New York, no doubt motivated by evil racial animus, was covered everywhere. But last year, also, there was a racially motivated mass murder in Waukesha, Wisconsin, that did not garner near the coverage. Why? Because the racial demographics of the perpetrators and the victims did not hew to the contemporary left's chosen social justice prerogative on racially delineated narrative. So choosing what to cover is a key part of the media's power dynamic in influencing the culture. And the secondary component on curation, beyond what to cover, is how to cover it. Which facts will become part of the reportage? In Waukesha, race of the perpetrator and the racial motivations of the attack was purposefully omitted, whilst in Buffalo, it's been the entire focus. When mainstream coverage obscures through curation relevant parts of the fact pattern, the populace becomes subtly brainwashed. This has been a huge political tool of the establishment left, and goes back to my father's quote on politically leftist liberalism as a philosophy of conscience. By ginning up these emotional reactions, the body politic is changed culturally, and the political purveyors of such activity get an outsized political gain at the ballot box. So what to do about it? Obviously, as with my father's experience, it is to never yield. If we are censored, we keep pushing our words and ideas through black market channels. But as much as we complain about the censoriousness of the big tech oligarchy, which is just an extension of the same milieu of the media editorial oligarchy from yesteryear, it's this advent of technology, social media, digital media, etc., that have broken down the barriers to entry. And since that breakdown, born of the internet age of the 1990s, when anyone could become a blogger, and with the advent of portable audio, visual, mobile telephony, now we are all capable of being journalists, which is the essence of the media organization on whose board I serve, Project Veritas. Just in this room today, we have representation of viable organizations and platforms that 25 years ago would not even be conceivable. Social media alternatives, Getter, for instance, Parler, True Social, digital media via video in PragerU, guerrilla journalism and muckraking via my organization, Project Veritas, which just this week has exposed the hypocrisy and censoriousness of Twitter once again. I urge all to watch these videos online. As of a few minutes ago, they had over 20 million views, the two videos, just on Twitter. We have social media accounts that have become journalist platforms in and of themselves, like Visegrad24 on Twitter with almost 300,000 followers that has covered Central European politics and events better than any mainstream news desk such as the FT's or BBC's. We have academic-style conservative journals like the European Conservative, on whose editorial board I proudly serve, which is growing massively every quarter and is distributed all over the world, both by physical and digital means. Steve Bannon's War Room podcast reaches millions every day and has become a political career-making venue for many reactionary upstarts, despite its being turfed off of mainstream distribution channels, and Steve being public enemy number one as a thought leader to the censorious institutional left of the American and Western European elite. So there is hope. Competition can and will exist, because this too is a component of the human condition, and a key factor why Marxism and all its variants unflinchingly fails. And just as original sin suggests their fallibility, which is the other key factor in Marxism's non-viability, the converse is that our determination to strive and create and succeed and be free, this is part of our culture in the West, and it's worth saving. And the free speech rights and free societies that the media exists as the mechanism to preserve and protect, and in its utilization thereof, are the absolute quintessence of the natural rights we are endowed with by our Creator. In such free societies as Poland and Hungary, where there is actual pluralism in the media, despite what the Anne Applebaums and Christian Amanpours of the world say, they are thriving. Political disputes, which of course exist, are healthy. In contemporary dictatorships, those disputes do not exist, but gulags do. And the alternative media, alternative to the mainstream purveyors of the establishment's politically motivated and purposeful disinformation, the alternative media we here in this room create are robust and growing and wholly necessary to preserve real freedom and real justice. Otherwise, the radical left progressive liberal tyrants at war with the truth, telling us there are 72 genders and men can get pregnant, will win and create their despotisms where free thought and traditional values will be purged from society. They will become the fascists actualized in such despotisms that still exist, rooted in the same thuggish and communist mentalities that subjugated this part of the world for so long, and that many in this room, like my father in Poland did, fought against. We certainly do not embrace leftist progressive liberalism as the conservative thought leaders of the contemporary era, no more than we embrace the Marxist and Soviet-style fascism of modern-day China, Russia, Cuba, North Korea, Venezuela, etc. Places where free press is dead and lies reign supreme, where they tell the citizenry about their record crop yields, yet the citizens are starving, or they tell their citizenry Uyghurs are merely being re-educated, not genocidally liquidated, or that Ukraine needs to be denazified and a Belarusian vassal state in hock to Soviet-era KGB despots must be reinstalled to reassert a traditional order. Our culture is oriented toward truth and justice and morality and natural law, which are all connected. And our media that we continue to create will do so in furtherance of this culture and with expanded peace and prosperity being the ultimate goal. Thank you.